The content discussed in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be construed as financial or mortgage advice. Always consult with a licensed professional before making any decisions regarding mortgages or financial matters.
Welcome to the Canadian Mortgage Show. Here are mortgage professionals Alex Pang and Alex Shanks to cut through the BS and educate Canadians on all things mortgages and real estate.
Welcome to another episode of the Canadian Mortgage Show. Alex Pang here along with Alex Shanks. This is episode 25. How are you doing, Alex?
I'm doing pretty good, man. I know you're even happier with your jersey on here right now. We might be bashing Trump here a little bit, but for everyone, obviously Canadians, we won the four-way tournament here, which was pretty awesome.
Yeah. For all you like the haters out there, I'm like, yeah, it's only 4 nations and it's a made-up tournament, but guess what? Olympics is a made-up tournament too, but it just so happens to be smaller.
Yeah.
Here, this whole politically charged thing, it harkens back to, like, for you hockey fans out there, harkens back to the good old Summit series of 1972 or the Canada Cup of 87 and all that. It's like our society versus their society and our way and all that stuff. And with the whole Trump thing and Trump trolling us saying, I'm cheering on Team USA and hope you beat Canada and welcome Canada in as a 51st state. And I'm rooting for Governor Trudeau and like, Trump, you could suck it.
Yeah, take that. We should have put a gamble on it. Should have put a gamble on we get to take over your place if we win.
Yeah, but you know what? At the end of the day, the big winner is hockey. It's great to see best on best.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw a lot of it, but a lot of emotions come up, and even heard some hockey commentators in the States say their friends are actually asking them about the game. Oh, hey, we're going to watch the game, so it's good for the game of hockey, no matter who wins. So
yeah.
I'm glad the good guy.
I saw a stat about NBA and NHL, like the difference in salaries right now. I think an average salary for an NHL player is like $3.5 million. It's $11 million for an NBA player. But the views for NHL and NHL is just catching up. It's crazy.
Yeah, and then there's been a lot of hate on NBA because their ratings are down, and the All-Star game that they had this past weekend was like only had 3 million views. It was terrible. Even some of the NBA veterans hated the format, and it's not the best comparison. You're comparing an All-Star weekend, which even an NHL All-Star weekend it's terrible as well. But you're comparing to the 4 nations, which is as close as the Olympics as you can get with country pride and everyone trying. And it's like great hockey. This is the time for, hey, NHL to make ground in the States. Now, we've always try to play like little brother. Hey, like me as a hockey man, you know what? It's a growing game. We love it, and wouldn't have it any other way.
I'm excited. This is like the prequel to getting ready for the Olympics and everything. Yeah. Now it's pretty cool to see Sidney Crosby out there. Do we think is he going to play in the Olympics? What do you think?
I don't know. He's getting up there. He's 37, trying to do this Olympics World Cup every 2 years and such. He probably might make the team in two years, but he'll be like a 4th liner by then. Yeah. But tournaments like this, it's good, but you need more teams. You got to have expanded teams like Czechia, Germany, and who knows? We don't know where Russia is and if they're going to be allowed in and all that stuff. But yeah, this is as close as best of best.
That satellite one.
That's as close as best as you can, and it's wow. We haven't seen this in 9 years, and the last real, the 2010 and 2014 Olympics, and then the World Cup in 2016. But yeah, it was that. We all thought it was like, oh, what kind of lame tournament is this with 4 teams? And then now it's, wow, this is great hockey.
Especially the first game between the U.S. and Canada, three brawls within the first 30 seconds.
I was like, wow, this is great hockey. But man, so we should get going on this, eh? What do we got on docket, Alex?
Yeah, let's not talk about hockey. Let's jump into what's going on with Canada. We're talking not as great things right now. We all keep talking about inflation. Now, inflation did rise in the month of January. Now, it previously was 1.8%. Now, inflation is compared year over year. So we're comparing January of 2025 to January 2024, and it's now at 1.9%. Now, I honestly expected this because of the higher energy prices, as well as the first increase in car prices in 8 months. Like the oil, fuel, and everything was going up. I pretty much expected inflation to go up a little bit.
Yeah, at the same time, that was the period too where we had the GST holiday. So it just ended 5 days ago. And did you really notice it at all? Like,
I wasn't ever, oh, look at this, my price is down. It wasn't enough that I
Yeah,
noticed it.
and the only thing I noticed was when I was going out for like coffees and lunches, I'm like, oh, this is like a round number, like straight up 50
Yep.
cents or whatever, like straight up dollar. So only time I noticed that the GST holiday ended was it wasn't a whole number anymore. I'm like, oh, I guess the GST holiday's over. So I guess that's what it happened. This little tick, we expected it. Like we see a Bank of Canada, the rate announcements on March 11th. The odds of it cutting, it's dropped now to 50-50. So I'm in that same boat as well, especially with this 30-day reprieve from the tariffs that Trump has imposed on us. It's expiring soon. So what's next?
Yeah, that's the steel tariffs. And then what's going to happen if he's going to put 100% tariffs on cars and everything? There's still a lot of uncertainty. And that's where it's going to come up before the rate announcement. But is the Bank of Canada going to have enough data to really make up their mind of should we cut rates right now? Do they need to get ahead of it, or do they need to pause and wait to see what's going to happen?
Yeah, and even in the mortgage world, this past week we're seeing because the bond yields have increased a little bit, banks have increased their fixed rates this week by a little bit again. And at the same time, you would think it would affect the fixed rates, but they're creeping back some of the discounts off prime on variable rates now. So there's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah,
in the
I mean,
market.
we were so close to having variable being lower than fixed. You know, if another rate announcement happens, that's going to happen. But we were even like last week, I'm like, holy shit, we're almost there. And then boom, they took 0.1% away on a prime discount. I'm like, oh, damn it.
The day of prime like variable being less than fixed that's a historical norm. The last few years, because of the whole inflation getting out of control and rates shooting up to the moon, we were in a backwards world for a little bit when it came to rates, but it's slowly returning to historical norms. But we'll see how it plays out the rest of this year, the next few months, to be honest. Yeah.
Totally. Exactly. Now, the other one that we're seeing again more is rents just dropping further in Alberta markets. I have a lot of investor clients that are looking, they're like, whoa, I just keep seeing the rents go down and down. I'm like, this is why. Remember when I told you when we're looking at, we are not looking at highs from 2024. We're going back to what the average is. When you're looking at investment properties, you cannot take the high of a rental property and say, hey, it's going to keep getting $2,500 because 2 years before it was only getting $2,000 a month. We got to take an average, not the recent high. And so it's scaring some investors because they're all fully planning on higher rentals.
Yeah. And at the same time too, rents are dropping because supply is increasing. And why is supply increasing? Yep. A whole bunch of things. The government finally turned off the taps of immigration. The mortgage renewal cliff is coming, where a lot of owners had mortgages were taken out at 2% rate, whether it be fixed or variable. They're coming up for renewal. And rather than continuing the negative cash flow, landlords, investors are looking to dump now. So that's why we see a lot of supply in the market, especially the strata properties, condos, townhouses. And more supply means it's bringing down demand. And you know what? That's actually good for renters, not so good for investor owners.
Yeah.
Toronto's.
Yeah, but that's where hopefully we'll get into a better parity of like before. Rents and mortgage sometimes were close to each other. We've been quite high because higher like mortgages where rent was cheaper. It's just coming back to more of a parity now. And this is a crazy stat, and it have to look into it more. But right now, Toronto has 6,100 units for rent, and only 600 actually got taken in the last month. And me and Alex have talked a lot about the pre-sales in Toronto, and that is because a lot of pre-sales are coming up, and the market is flooded. For sales on properties, and even now people just trying to rent because they can't even sell the place. They're like, oh shit, I can't sell it, but I might as well try and rent it. And the rentals, or someone in Toronto might actually be getting a deal on a rental here.
Yeah, exactly. So it looks like it's even less than a 10% absorption rate. If you're looking to rent, I guess it's a good time to get a deal in the market. And it hasn't just been limited to Alberta and Ontario. BC is seeing the same thing too, with new listings in BC have spiked up to about 17,000. That's seasonally adjusted monthly. It's the highest we've seen since this data has been tracked in the last 15 years.
2010.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen. My fear with the spring market before was like rates were coming down, we were getting the lower rates and everything, and there was just not enough supply out there. So I feel again, this is what's going to give the Bank of Canada more room to be able to cut rates because they know that hey, we can see that there's more supply coming in the areas that have always been super pent up, which will allow us to hopefully not go into a feeding frenzy on home prices.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, something that's happened that's we've noticed when markets are soft and developers have units that are underwater. And we saw it a little bit in the lower mainland here, but something that I saw on X was in York, Ontario. It's a suburb of Ontario. There was a street cam that caught two men setting fire to a pre-construction home. Um, Now, obviously, we know the reason behind that is because it's for insurance fraud. The last year or so, I haven't heard anything lately, but probably the last year or so, there's some developments in the Fraser Valley go up in flames. One in New West and one in Langley mysteriously go up in flames. And probably why? It's for the insurance fraud because they're not selling
Yeah.
or they're not getting the money that they should, or properties are not appraising for the value people have purchased at.
Or someone knows that they can't close on it and they're like, if it's on fire, it doesn't exist anymore there. I don't have to buy it anymore.
Obviously, York police are looking for those two men, but I wouldn't be surprised if more and more of these these stories come up. And yeah, and you know what? At the same time, I'm pretty sure we're all going to get affected somehow with home insurance rates going up and such. And
the insurance companies aren't going to eat that.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. With the home insurance rates being up, and I don't know, they're going to tighten up on fire, especially with pre-sale developments. They might require the developers to have like cams on site, like security cameras on site or something like that.
Yeah, which then they're going to have to pass those prices on to the consumer for buying the place, and we're just going to get more expensive.
Yeah, there's a story there, but I wouldn't be surprised if more instances of that like that pop up.
Yeah, and there was quite a bit. I know 2023, there was some pretty big ones in Ontario, a lot there. And there was just multi-million-dollar homes. They were being lit on fire. And it was, people were on the news, hey, we can't close on it. You need to drop the prices. We bought it. The home prices aren't selling for that now. And then the house catches on fire.
And there was one in Langley, Alexander Square. It was a low-rise condo development. I forget. It was a few years ago. It was in New West. I think it's like Westminster Quay or something like that. The pier there that caught on fire as well. And we can see it. Even people like see it from outside, like it's kind of insurance fraud kind of thing. And I'm sure the insurance community there is starting to catch wind on that. We'll see where it goes from there. So something that just recently got announced, probably a couple days ago now, and didn't Trudeau resign? Or he's supposed to resign, right?
It's supposed to have resigned. I don't know.
Like, why is he still announcing these things? I'm like, aren't you just supposed to go away now? So he's just announced this. The federal government has launched a historic $40 billion infrastructure project, a high-speed rail network spanning from Toronto to Quebec City. So this high-speed train can reach top speed of 300 kilometers an hour. So it's connecting Peterborough, Ottawa, Montreal, Laval, and Trois-Rivières along the way. What do you think about this idea? We're obviously in the West Coast. What do you think about this?
You know what? I honestly don't hate it. To me, this is how we have to be able to get to some of the suburbs. For one, people can't afford to live in Toronto. It is just batshit crazy there. We'll quote Ron Butler on that. And we need to be able to get people to be able to live somewhere else that's more affordable, but still work in Toronto. And so that's where I don't know exactly how long it's going to take, but think about in New York and stuff, their trains are slower. Think about Japan. This is how we're able to move the cities so people can live away and they can still get to the city.
I would love for a bullet train to span all of Canada, but then that would probably cost trillions of dollars.
Yeah, that's where, to me, it has to be like Vancouver would need one. I completely believe that
it has
Vancouver
to make
needs
economic
one to maybe
sense too, right? I don't mean to shit on you guys in the prairies, but not much happens in the prairies. Let's say a bullet train from Vancouver to, I don't know, Calgary, something like that, or
totally.
But
But even just the hardest thing is, and I don't fully know like how the bullet trains work in Japan, like all the different stops and everything. But obviously, they have to be able to stop enough because it's, hey, what we just don't want to just go straight to Calgary.
Yeah,
We need it to stop at
yeah,
Hope so someone can catch
yeah,
a train
yeah,
from Hope to get to
yeah. And then
Vancouver.
stop in
And
Kelowna or Cranbrook or
yeah,
Kamloops or whatever, right? Jasper, Banff, everywhere along the way.
that's it's I would be okay. It's obviously going to put us further into debt. There's no doubt on that. But that is the way. I don't know another way to be able to bring home prices to more affordable for people
Mm.
so that you can still have that good job downtown where a lot of people need that work. Or maybe you just are a construction worker, you need to work on a building. Well, you can't live. You can't live anywhere
Yeah, I
else.
get it. But I'm just questioning the timing of this. Is this the right time to announce something like that, especially with the whole trade wars that's happening and all that? Shouldn't our government be more worried about fixing the existing infrastructure with trade, like interprovincial trade, all that stuff? Are you not keeping your eye on the prize? I'm not poo-pooing on this. It's just I'm just questioning
Yeah.
the timing of this. Is this the best time to do something like this at this time?
Yeah, I can see that, but it's not like we're not going to build like a refinery. That's like the cost of that and what we get from it isn't going to benefit us. That's not going to happen. So maybe they're going to say, hey, all these people that might lose their jobs because of these tariffs, hey, we're going to take that workforce and we are going to do something with it. And so that's where there can be a benefit to it. Put it in like a lot of bridges and have a toll. Hey, when you go across here, you obviously have a fee to get on the bullet train, but also have a toll. Hey, we're going to run this toll for 10 years to get like our cost back, and then we're going to reduce it. That's where I see it being a
Yeah,
benefit.
yeah. I would love to see something like that in the West. And obviously,
I think it needs to be there
yeah,
for sure. It's, hey, do it there. I don't love Quebecois. Like, it's not, I don't think it's great
yeah,
that way, but look at the places like Peterborough, Ottawa, Montreal, like the home prices compared to Toronto. We're talking like $1 million to $1.5 million less in
yeah.
price.
It's like fractions on the dollar for sure. Out here on the West Coast, before this whole tariff thing, there was a plan for a train to connect Vancouver, Seattle, and Portland, and I'm all for that. That's great because we're probably along the Pacific Northwest is what we call it, along the Cascadia Mountains and stuff like that. I'm all for that, but especially with what's going on, I think that's put on hold. Yeah.
Yeah. That's we're talking about tariffs here when you're talking about the trans like border and stuff. It's so funny. We're all complaining about the tariffs between U.S. and Canada. I didn't realize the tariffs between all of our provinces. For us to send stuff across from province to province, we know alcohol from Alberta to BC. What the hell are we doing?
Yeah, yeah. Like if there's any silver lining of this tariff war that Trump is shining on us, is that the system that we have is we're not trading amongst each other. We're trading like north south down to the
Yep,
states and back. We should be
yep,
trading like east west across the
yep,
country.
yep,
And obviously this is going to take years and decades to fix, but it shines a light on, yes, we are heavily reliant on the US in terms, we've been essentially being bullied right now by the Trump administration. And
yep,
I would
yep.
say there's little to
And
anything we can do about it.
hey,
I talked about it last week where the border lines are empty. And I'm seeing a lot, like even my wife and I are watching TV, and even before starting the pod, watching the Four Nations game, all the commercials are on like buy Canadian, proudly produced in Canada. And oh, there's a lot of these. And I guess a lot of the companies are
yep.
doubling down on the whole sentiment in the country in buying Canadian and all that stuff. No, for all these companies, good on you on that. So speaking of
Totally.
Canada, Air Canada, when it comes to travel, they're planning to cut flights into the US amid the tariff disputes. Good on them. We don't know what WestJet has any plans on. There's some other airplane related stuff going on. Alex,
Yeah, let's talk about it. We all saw the news of the Delta plane crash in Toronto. And just for anyone to know, we had a lawyer come on our show back probably 15 episodes, Dylan Taylor. He wasn't on the plane that crashed. He was on the tarmac of that plane crash. It's just
wow.
craziness.
Okay. Okay.
And cool thing about that plane, looking more into the engineering of it, everyone's, oh my God, a plane crash. The way that it crashed, it like engineering, it worked amazing. That Delta airplane, it is built in Canada.
Hmm.
That is the cool thing about it that way. Landed, flipped onto its roof. There was no casualties. Just crazy that one.
Yeah. For those of you who haven't followed the news, if you guys living under a rock, there was a Delta airplane. It turns out it was actually ran by a regional airline, Endeavour Air. It was landing on the Toronto airport, and I guess it was high winds at the time. And when it landed, it didn't land perfectly. I guess the wheels weren't landing perfectly straight. It was leaning towards the right side. And I guess the wing snapped on the right side. And that's how when the plane flipped, turned onto its like upside down. And that's when the flames start. Thankfully, no casualties. Now, Delta has turned around to offer $30,000 to each passenger that was aboard the flight. And the caveat is there's no strings attached. They're not admitting any guilt or fault or anything like that. No strings attached. It does not affect their rights. But we know they're trying to buy good favor so they don't get sued and such like that.
Yeah, there's going to be some people getting sued. Like that's I don't know. I don't fully know what happened. Honestly, in my head, when this happened, I'm like, God damn it, we're going to have even more weather delays. Which is, hey, you know what? I'm okay with that. I want the planes to be flying safe. But obviously, there's just going to be more red tape placed here now. And I know we're going to talk about some of that.
Yeah, and more and more, would you say the last month or so, there's more plane crashes around the world? Yeah, whether it big thing, crazy. Small thing. Wasn't a while ago where that in Washington, D.C., 60 people, helicopter. Was it a plane that flew right into a helicopter that was stationary kind of thing?
Helicopter flew into the plane.
Why are there more and more things like that happening in this past year or so where before we haven't seen any of it? Like, what's going on? I don't know.
Yeah. And so let's talk about it. I know this is from a retired Delta pilot. The Toronto crash is going to reveal a lot to the American flying public, especially as it regards the mainline carriers, Delta, United American, and the reliance on these regional carriers, which is like Endeavour, SkyWest, to carry their brand. For example, the Toronto crash was flown by Delta Airlines by Endeavour Air. So it's, again, we're not going to say lower level, but hey, you have a higher level, then you have them subcontracting to someone else.
Yeah.
And usually when that happens, it's at lower prices, lower payments for the people that are working.
Now, according to this retired Delta pilot, he said that regional carriers are, generally speaking, entry-level positions for pilots and flight attendants. They are resume building for them. A pilot hired, they need to have at least 1,500 hours. The other option for training and experience is the military, which this retired Delta pilot decided to go. Now, and he said that training departments are...
You want to know what's funny, Alex? I saw that, which in our notes here, I saw which is the route I took. And I'm like, what the hell? Is Alex going to tell me that he was a pilot? I didn't realize about it. Yeah. I was waiting for you to say that.
So no, it's not me. It's the retired Delta pilot. So he went on saying that training departments are different as well as the types of aircraft they fly. So I don't know if he's trying to fearmonger, but he's just saying to people, when you book a flight, it's going to be a combination of the carrier's aircraft and various pilot qualifications. So keep in mind when you do book that whatever the connection is, that you see if it's an express or is it a sourced out by, just to be mindful. It doesn't mean like it's you're going to crash and everything. So I don't want to be like make everyone scared of flying, but just to be mindful of it. But
yeah, I'm going to be flying March 16th, and I don't really want to think about it.
Yeah, exactly. You should say a few prayers before you leave. Now, I don't know if this is probably controversial, but I just want to. This goes to mention, but it turns out the pilot of that Delta plane is a 26-year-old female who just got certified last month. Now, the DEI naysayers.
But there'd be two. Yeah. There's two. There would have been she would have been the co-pilot and the other one. Yeah. So that's where I'd like to know how long has that person been flying for? Yeah. Was she the one that was landing? Was the other person landing? Yeah. And that's where this stuff's going to get opened up, I feel like. Yeah,
and then the initial rumors or the investigation was that the Endeavour Air was part of the whole DEI movement, that they're having an all-female crew. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to poo-poo on anybody. It's just you should get it based on merit. But this is definitely fuel for all the DEI naysayers, especially in the States with Trump and the red states and all that. But someone on X was flipping it on the other end. Just think about this. This is the first pilot to land an airplane upside down with no fatalities. So for those DEI
Yep.
naysayers, there's your rebuttal. Yeah, don't think of it as just because it's female and stuff. It's just, I guess it just goes to show that it needs to have like better training or better awareness, better all that stuff.
Yeah, it's honestly, everyone, it's think of the same as mortgages, doctors. A lot of these things, like it is hard to train for a lot of things. Sometimes people are in these places, they've done the schooling, they've done the training. They're not going to get the hours until they're out there. That's why in the pilots, like there is two people. There's one that's been well certified. They have multiple years of history. And on the mortgage world, hey, you go and get your license. You're just out to the wolves. You have no one there supporting you if you're by yourself. And I've seen people make the biggest mistakes of their life because maybe they went with someone that didn't actually have any use, didn't know what it was like to own a home, to own an investment property. And that's where it's hard. You need the boots on the ground. There's a thing I've seen. Companies want 15 years of history. They want like you to have 15 years experience, but they want you to be like 25 years old. And it's like, how do you get that stuff without starting the job?
Yeah.
And that's where it's hard.
Exactly. So for those of you who are looking for help, mortgage brokers out there, ask for experience. Have you owned? How long you've been in the business and such? So Alex and I, we've been in the business a long time. We've been through the ups and downs. We've been through every experience. We've bought and sold ourselves. We own investment properties, so we know what it's like. So you have us on your side.
What's your thoughts on that, Alex? That one, I just always have a hard time. I personally believe that you should have either bought a place, own a place. Like, I can't sell something to someone unless I've said I've actually done it. And again, you have to start somewhere. And so it's such a hard thing to say.
It is. Yeah. So I'm sure in the beginning, like, not to poo-poo any of the young guys out in the industry. Of course, when you want to start out and you're living at home, there's going to be people that will support you and be like, give you a chance. So you'll have to gain as much experience as you can from a theory standpoint because you haven't owned yourself. But once you own yourself, you've been through it, so you can speak on that personal experience. So that just gives you so much more than just the book theory and the concept of it.
And owning a home, like that's one, it's the investing. That's the one that really gets me when I see people pitching, buy an investment property. It's going to make you wealthy and all this stuff. And I'm like, you don't even own an investment property. How can you spout this to other people to say you should go do this when you don't do it yourself?
The saying is when you getting parent advice from people who aren't parents themselves, or marriage advice from people who have divorced 3 times.
I love it when it's animal owners. This is what I do for my dog, and this is a kid. This isn't a dog.
Exactly. Theory is great until practice is so much better and experience is so much better. So it looks like it's time for viewer mailbag, right?
Yeah, let's do it. We're back. We finally got lots of questions loaded up. We're sitting with a big bank of people that have asked stuff, and we finally got time here with not all the tariff talk.
All right. Okay. So the first question here is, what are all the costs that we need to think about when getting or buying our first home?
So the hardest thing on this one is it is different in every province. For one, every province has different taxes, like property transfer tax in BC. We have a property transfer tax. Now, if you're a first-time home buyer, if the purchase price is less than $500,000, you don't have to pay anything. When it goes above 500, up to 825, you'll get an $8,000 rebate. I find a lot of people, they get told, hey, you just need a $25,000, $30,000 down payment. They don't get told what's the other closing cost. The big one for BC is the land transfer tax. You got some legal fees. Sometimes you can have an appraisal fee. Also, depending on when you're buying, a big one people forget about is if you're buying after July, you may actually owe the sellers money for property taxes, because if they have actually already paid them for it, you are going to owe them for that. And that's one that people forget. They're like, oh my God, I owe $4,000. Why do I owe this? And so I find and I know you do it too as well, it's making a very specific like budget broken down for all your clients, showing them what's the cost going to look like.
There's a few others.
Great thing about Alberta. Alberta has a nice low, like a very small property transfer tax. In Ontario is another bad one. You got the Ontario property transfer tax. If you buy in Toronto, you get another one. There's a double hit there. And that's where I see people that work out of province, and I do it myself. I'm licensed in other provinces, but I've had someone that was getting a mortgage from someone in Alberta to buy here in BC. They didn't factor in the property transfer tax. They had to call their parents at the 11th hour because they were actually not going to be able to close on their property.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a couple of other upfront costs would be like homeowners insurance. So if you live in a house, it would be fire insurance, contents insurance. If you're living in a strata property, it would be liability insurance. Like your strata fees will cover, let's say there's $100,000 deductible for a water damage, but you want to get some insurance to cover the gap, right? Like to cover you up until the 100,000 till your strata takes over, kind of thing. And we're not spring chickens anymore. So if we move, we're not going to ask our friends to move for beer and pizza because they're not insured, moving expense, all that stuff. And chances are, if you're buying your first place, you're probably going to want to buy new stuff, right? Are you going to moving out of mom and dad's, all the old crappy stuff that you grew up with, or ooh, that 50-inch or 60-inch screen TV at Costco is only $800 now. And our new furniture set that could easily be $5,000, $10,000. Like those costs can add up. It's good to account for everything so that when the time comes, you're not like, I didn't account for this, or my mortgage broker, my bank has not told me about this, so that you're not surprised for all that.
I love watching the videos. It was big on TikTok for a while where everyone's, I got the new keys to my home and I'm living in my home. I don't have money for anything else.
And they're sitting on the floor.
Just sitting on the floor with the key. Yeah. Like I got my brand new home and I don't have anything. Yeah. And now this is another good one. And I find it always confuses a lot of people is, can you get a mortgage with a partner that's on maternity leave?
Okay. Short answer is yes, provided that your partner has a guaranteed return to work date. Now, I'm not telling you the tricks of the trade, but make sure we have an employment letter that says the return to work date and the intention is to go back to work. Whatever happens afterwards, we don't need to know about, but yes, the intention is. But now, if your partner, we can only count that your partner's base salary in that case. Now, if your partner is in a kind of a salesy kind of position with commission or any bonuses like that, if they're on maternity leave, we can't count them. We can only use their base salary, and as long as there's a guaranteed to work date on their employment letter.
Now, it's funny. I see we have this other question. The one thing that I find really funny, Alex, and I know people always ask it. Let's say, hey, you're on maternity leave. Your average income's $80,000. We know that you're only going to get about $2,500 from the government. Now we get to use the $80,000, even though you're not making it. The other thing I always have to make sure people understand is you have to budget this. Just say, hey, I can qualify you for this, but remember, you have to make this payment. The thing is, we get to use that income. But someone could go and work overtime and say they have a year's history of overtime. Lenders don't like that. They need to have 2 years history. But it's like, hey, you're going to let someone use maternity leave income that like they're actually not making this money whatsoever. But hey, you have proof of someone making overtime for the last 6 months, 7 months. No, we're not going to count that.
Yeah, that's a weird thing some of the policies in our industry doesn't really make sense. But we don't make the rules. We don't carry the golds. We just follow it.
We follow it and we play with those.
Exactly. So here's another one. I'm working overtime, like you just said, but my bank says I can't use the income. Why not?
Yeah, and this is a funny one. And the reason why that it got taken away is back in the day, like before 2012, you could use overtime. You could go get one pay stub with overtime income on it, and you could go use that income. Now, banks and lenders have caught on to that. This person's just going to go work overtime, qualify for more, and they actually can't afford it. And so what lenders want to see now is they want to see an average. They like to see a 2-year average showing that it's consistent, because you could just go work for 6 months, ram up a bunch of overtime, and then after that, you may be like, oh shit, I'm so burnt out, I can't work anymore. So they want to see a consistency of it.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, that's the same that goes for part-time employees too, like who don't have guaranteed hours. If you have guaranteed hours, we can use their guaranteed hours. But if they work part-time, but then it's a casual, especially when you're working in unions, you're not officially a permanent part-time, but you're working in casual basis. As long as you have 2 years of working in that, we can use it. We just have to do a 2-year average. I know some people who work part-time or casual and they pick up shifts, which is great for the flexibility if they want. But yeah, we can only use a 2-year average to establish some history, because maybe, like you said, you might have went guns a-blazing for 6 months, but you burned yourself out and you realize, shoot, I can't work 80 hours a week consistently. Then it's average out over the 2 years.
Yeah, that's where people say, I'll just go get 3 different jobs and I'll qualify for it. No, you got to go work those 3 jobs for 2
Yeah,
years.
there
Then.
was a period where I had a client who had 2 full-time jobs. And I'm like, they're asking if
Yeah,
we could use both their income. I'm like, I'm gonna ask, but I'm like, I doubt it
yeah,
because lenders are gonna be like, this is not sustainable. Like, unless they see a 2-year average on both. Now,
yeah,
it's very common that
yeah,
someone has a full-time job and a part-time job. A lot of people
yeah,
have that, right? And then in that case, they do the 2-year average on the part-time job, which is
yeah,
fine,
yeah,
unless it was a permanent part-time, which they don't need the 2 years. But
yeah.
yeah, that's why.
Yeah, I got one accepted once on an exception of they had a guaranteed job for the last multiple years, and then they got another one. We only had about 7 months, but it was
Yep.
guaranteed. The only thing the lender needed us to do was have them be able to contact the other employer to ensure that, yes, they were allowed to be working both jobs. Sometimes people are working 2 jobs and they're not even allowed to be doing it. They're, okay, I'm doing this on the side. And so, yeah, we were able to get the lender to accept it because the other employer knew about it and said, yes, they're both working 30 hours a week, which is total of 60. And we're able to get the income
Was
used
it
that
in the
way.
same industry or were they competing companies? Oh,
Similar.
similar. Okay.
Not competing, but similar
Okay.
industry. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah. Tech stuff, anything in the tech, there's just so much money there. And it's, again, lenders, banks, they look at what type of jobs they are. Nurses, hey, if you're on as long as you have a casual full time, we can use that income right away. If you were a casual full time employee at, say, like a restaurant, they're going to want 2 years history
Yeah.
of it. For a nurse, they know that it's a very well sought after job.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I think that kind of puts a wrap on this episode there. Any closing thoughts, Mr. Shanks?
No, it's hopefully have a good weekend there, Alex. I'm going to try and get up the mountain, do some skiing here, and enjoy the weekend with the
Yeah,
family.
so for us, we finally picked up our used Acura MDX this week. There was a huge kerfuffle.
Okay, you got the title.
Yeah,
Yeah, did you get the title all sorted out and
The
everything?
whole 5 days we were on this huge rabbit trail looking for backup cars. Like I even got to the point where I'm
Yeah.
like, hey, there's a good deal in a couple cars in Toronto. Should I fly there and drive it back? And then cooler
Holy
heads
shit.
prevailed, and people have told me don't buy cars back east because more snow means more salt, means more chances of rust in those cars. So I'm like, okay, fine. So
Yep.
long story short, everything cleared up in a lot quicker time, and we got the original car that we bought, and we picked it up yesterday.
Amazing.
And now I'm already thinking about modding it, putting a like 12-inch CarPlay screen at the front, so bring myself back to my 20 days and such. So
Yeah, it's gonna sit in your car and play video games.
well, we
there.
have a DVD player in the back too. I'm like, do we still have DVDs? And I'm like, this is 12 years old. That's this old nostalgia back. I'm glad
Yeah.
all that stress is
Nice.
coming to an end. But yeah, so
Nice.
let's put
Awesome,
a wrap
man.
to this episode, folks. We value you for listening and tuning in. If you like this pod, please share it, like it, and spread the word because we're here for you. So on behalf of Alex Shanks, I'm Alex Pang. Thanks for tuning in this episode. We'll see you next time.
Talk to you later.
Now, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, make sure to follow us. Please give us a 5-star rating. You can even send us an email because we want to know what you guys want to hear about. That's what we're here for. Reach out anytime.